Okay, hi guys, my name's Shannon Beveridge. Welcome back to Exes and O's. I already know I'm going to regret that I wore my hair down, but I just took a shower. It's air drying. I don't want to put a crease in it. And also, might as well just give you guys a hair length reveal. Here it is. It's been about a solid year of awkward hair length for me. I feel like I'm like this close to not being awkward. I feel like I look like Jesus or Tarzan, and I like can't unsee it. I cannot unsee it. But I'm like, oh my God, I really want it to get to like a normal length that I like before my tour, which if you don't know, I'm going on tour in March 5th to March 21st. Starts in Toronto, ends in LA. Please come to a show. My birthday is March 19th, and I'll be in San Francisco. So if you're in San Fran, come celebrate my birthday with me. But I'm praying that it will get to like a normal length by the tour starting, but I'm so scared it's not gonna. And if it doesn't, I think I have to cut it and go short again, which means I just spent a year of my life growing my hair out for nothing. Or at least that's how it feels. It's just such a strange length. Like I don't know what to do. It's driving me crazy. But anyway, here it is, in case you didn't know. Welcome back to my room. This is the first time I'm back in my room this year, probably, right? Yeah. Welcome back to my room. I just got back on Saturday. Today's Tuesday. I just got back Saturday from a week-long cruise. And my intro last week was very short, and I was on the cruise, and I gave no context about the cruise. I gave no context before the cruise. I don't think I even told anyone I was going on a cruise. But in that intro, I am like deathly ill. I was getting so seasick. After that night, my stepsister's boyfriend gave me these like Dramamine patches that go behind your ears, and it like made a world of difference. But when I was filming that intro, I was like, I'm going to die on this boat. Like I felt so sick. And then knowing I had to like edit all of that and then do my ads and do all these things, I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like I was on the verge of a panic attack in that intro, which I wonder, there's probably no way you could tell. I don't know. Go rewatch it and see if you notice, but you probably can't. But I could not, like, for the life of me, talk any more than I had to. Like, I had to just be like, in, out, done. But today I was just going to tell you guys a little bit more about my cruise, why I was on a cruise for a week. I feel like because I went on 2 cruises, I've been on 2 week-long cruises in the span of a year. Not both in 2025, thank God. I don't know how anyone could do that. But in the span of a year, I've been on 2 week-long cruises. And both were just like family things. But I feel as though it's looking like I love cruises. I need you to know I don't love cruises that much. Not enough to be going on week-long cruises twice in 1 year. A week-long cruise also really not for the faint of heart. That is a long time on a ship. But my stepbrother got married on the boat. On the cruise. So he got married to his wife now. And the like ship captain married them. It was a very like, it's like, I feel like it's a once in a lifetime experience to see 2 people get married in the middle of the ocean. I loved it. It was awesome. I'm so happy for them. It was like such a fun, quick ceremony, but then like a long celebration. So if you ever were wanting like a long celebration and like having all your people together, like a cruise is a great option because we did hang out a lot. Like we were really hanging out a lot. And it was I don't know how much y'all know about my family. I think a lot of people who followed me for a long time know, and like I've talked about it like intermittently, but I don't know if everyone knows. But my mom and dad both got remarried after they divorced each other. I had step siblings from both of those marriages, and I had like, yeah. And then my dad got re-divorced. How do I explain this? It's like if I could show y'all my family tree, you'd be very confused. Even with it like laid out for you, you'd be like, what? So let me just explain in a quick way. But my dad was married to a woman whose son got married on the cruise, who was my stepbrother, brother for 10 years of my life. Him and my little sister. So we are like siblings to each other. I say step just because I feel like if I don't clarify, people would be like, wait, I thought you only have one like sister. I do technically have one older sister, Casey, who you guys know from the podcast, but I do have these two siblings from my dad's marriage after my mom that are still like near and dear, and I love them so much. So my brother got married on the cruise, but it was just such a funny, interesting dynamic because he was there. Obviously, my ex stepmom was there with her new partner. My dad was there, and so was my brother's like biological dad. So there was like three dads there. I'm sure so many people were like, huh. I think maybe probably if you were looking at like our dinner table from afar, it probably looked like uncles. Like they had a lot of uncles. But no, much more interesting than that. We tried out to be on Family Feud on the boat and we got picked to do it. Like you go and you do the show. But the second round of tryouts was during the wedding, so we didn't get to do it. But we told them, we came in, you have to like come up with a name, and we told them our name was the X Steps because like we were step related and now we're technically not, like by law. And then I went on the cruise with my best friend Christy, and we told them we were like lesbian lovers to try to like add to the narrative. We're like, we're lesbians. These are our like Anyway, it would have been so funny if we got to do it, but we didn't because the wedding. And obviously the wedding was much more important, and it was beautiful and it was fun. Unfortunately, the weather was terrible the whole week. The whole week. The whole week. And so that also contributed to the boat moving a lot and my seasickness. But I survived. I had the best time. I had a great time. It was like a really nice treat to get to hang out with my brother and sister, because I don't get to hang out with them that much. And I definitely don't get to hang out with them like for that long, that confined, that never happens. Because we live all over. Like I live in LA, my brother lives in Lubbock, and my sister lives in Denver. And then my sister Casey lives in New York. So like we never get to spend that much time together. So it was really nice. For that reason, it was so nice. But yeah, I wish the weather had been better. And just a week-long cruise is just, it's a lot. That's a long, by day 5, I couldn't believe there were 2 more days. Like I was like, there's no way. There's no way. We're not going to make it off this boat. But look at me. I survived. I'm paler now than when I got on the boat somehow, but it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. It's crazy to be going through It's crazy to be going through a breakup. It's crazy to be going through a public breakup. It's crazy to be going through a breakup publicly with 2 people who have a podcast. Like, that's weird. That shouldn't happen. That really shouldn't happen. But I just want to say that, one, the next few episodes that come out are like pre-recorded. I don't know even when all of them are recorded. Some are recorded in December. Some are recorded in January, all at the beginning of the month. And I was like really in and out of like really, really heavily disassociating from my breakup at the time because I wasn't in LA. It didn't feel like it actually happened. Like, I know it happened, obviously. I knew it happened. But I was really avoiding the reality of my life. So I don't remember what I talk about usually on the podcast. I don't exactly know, as these episodes roll out, like where I was in those feelings. So just take it with a grain of salt. I don't think I get that much into it that often. But like, I'm just, I guess, just a pre-warning. Like, I don't know where I was, what I was doing, what I was thinking at that time, other than being like, this didn't happen. This is not happening to me. Anyway, I left December 21st. I didn't come back to LA until January. Oh my gosh. I don't even remember. The day before my cruise, I was in town for 1 day. I went on a cruise for a week, and then I finally got back on Saturday. And exactly what I thought was going to happen happened, where I walked in my door from the cruise and I was like, oh my God, I'm going through a breakup And that might sound crazy, but like it literally almost felt like Saturday was like day one of my breakup, which obviously it was not. But in a lot of ways, like I think I was just pushing off a lot of feelings, being like, they'll land when they land, they'll land when they land. And yeah, they started to land on Saturday this week, which is obviously just like we as people, we like have so many survival techniques and like ways to protect ourselves, and the ways that they come out are so interesting and they're so different for every person. But I know myself well enough that I kind of saw that coming. So the last few days have been not awesome emotionally, my own emotions. Like it's not about anything happening, just like me kind of processing things. And I also like came to the realization that as many of you know, I live alone now. This is the first time I've ever lived alone. And now this is the first time I've ever lived alone and been single. And it is just like it's just an adjustment, like a whole new, this has never been my life before. Like I'm not used to, it's not even been a week. It's Tuesday. It's been like 4 days. It's been like no time at all. But I'm really not used to being this like alone. Obviously I know I'm 32. I'm sure so many people are like, you should be used to it. But like I'm just not. So it's sad. I'm just so sad. It's like it's just so lonely. Like I'm lonely. But there are positives. Obviously there's always there's two edges to every sort. What the fuck am I saying? I don't know. But there are like positive things of like, okay, I can just kind of do what I need to do whenever I need to do it, which is different. It's just like a different feeling, even just not having a roommate. Like I can just like get up when I want to get up and do what I'm doing. And like no one's waiting for me to like make plans. Like I have friends and I have like my job, but you know, having like a relationship is it's like your day in and day out life. And now my day in and day out life is so different. Like, and I'm like back finally in my own house instead of being in New York or on a fucking boat in the middle of the ocean. Like I'm in my house thinking like, oh, well, usually probably on this day I'd be doing this thing. And on this day I'd be doing this thing. But instead I'm like, what do I do? What am I supposed to be doing? And obviously just like, yeah, it's a weird thing. It's so weird. I want to like communicate my feelings about how I'm feeling. And I also don't want it to seem like I'm trying to like communicate through my podcast to my ex, but like, obviously this is my podcast, so I should talk about what I want to talk about, but I'm not trying to like I'm just trying to like, it's like I can't really say all the things I would want to say because then, yeah, I mean I can. I guess like it's just like I miss someone so deeply. Like it's like this part of my life that was so my life, especially my life here in this like this house, this place. Like I'm like, these things are your things. These things are my things. Oh my God, you're not gonna get these things. You're not going to use these things anymore. Like contact cases and stuff. Like, I'm like, that's not mine. I don't wear contacts. Anyway, it's just like a lot. It's just like a lot of, it's just normal. I mean, I guess also if you ever go through a breakup or you're going through a breakup, these are just like normal things I think that happen. And like, I don't know. I think I'm trying to like figure out the right amount of sharing how I'm feeling. And I don't know that I'll ever know exactly what that is. But right now, because I'm telling you genuinely, and I knew I was doing this, but I genuinely like Saturday felt like the first day of my breakup. So I'm like behind, I like very behind in processing emotions, like breakup emotions. I'm going to therapy like every week. So I am processing emotions, but I'm also very analytical with my feelings. So I can be like, I can know stuff about my feelings and I can know the reality of things and like think about it. But feeling feelings for me is a lot more complicated for lots of reasons. You'd have to talk to my therapist. But yeah, I guess I'm like finally feeling my feelings. So I'm like finally feeling my breakup in a way more real way than what I was feeling when I wasn't here. If that makes sense. Anyway, I know everything will be okay. And if you're going through a similar thing, everything will be okay. You will be okay. But yeah. Breakups are just terrible. Like, breaking up is terrible. We really should, no one should do it. Okay, I'm done with this right now. I'm gonna go avoid my feelings. No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna feel my feelings because I can't avoid them in the four walls of this fucking house. There's a lot more walls than that, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, enjoy this episode. Nico is so funny and such a good comedian. If you are, looking for comedians that kind of are more queer and like speak to you, I highly recommend you checking out all of his content. All of his socials are below. He's going on tour. So if you are somewhere in America, I think it's in America, but I will have the links below. Catch him on tour. All right. And catch me on tour. Come to my tour. Also, I just dropped a new Friend of Dorothy hat that's like a baseball cap because I know a lot of people had asked for it in the past. It's literally just like a dad hat and it's embroidered and it's the same logo as the like more trucker style hat. But yeah, you can buy that. It's available now. Get it while it's there because I think it's I think there's a limited amount. Okay. Love you guys. Okay, hi guys, my name's Shannon Beveridge. Welcome back to Exes and O's, a podcast where we talk about queer relationships and sex, and I'm here in New York. I'm so excited for my guest today. His name is Nico Carney. He is a comedian. You may recognize him from the Seth Meyers show, or TikTok, or anywhere, or Netflix. Didn't you do something on Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay. Fucking awesome.
Thank you.
How's that feel?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was cool. I did this, I did Netflix's festival back in 2022.
Cool.
So they were doing like a New Faces kind of comedy, introducing yada yada.
That's so sick.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was like my first big like industry opportunity, so it was very cool.
You're young now, so you were young.
Yeah, I was 24 when I did that.
awesome.
Yeah, so it was like, and it was my first like big, I had really been doing comedy in New York for like a year at that point, so it was like really quite quick.
That's really crazy.
Yeah, it was
that, like,
cool.
doesn't happen.
No, I was very, it kind of all happened at once. I like submitted for it and was like, oh yeah, like I'll audition for this. Like, that's so cool that they're doing this, like not really thinking much of it. And then the audition went well and I was like, well, that went well. That was good. And then I got a call like a week later that's like, you're coming to LA in a month. And I was like, oh my God, that's wild.
So crazy. I mean, comedy especially, I feel like some people go for like 10 years without having any break at all, right?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's like, you know, obviously like anything, it's, you know, right place, right time, and like a little bit of luck and a little bit of effort goes a long way. But it's, I think I also was, you know, I'm a trans guy, so I talk a lot about being trans in my experience, and I think that that's something that people obviously want to talk about right now.
Topical for sure.
Yeah, but they don't know how, or like the comics who do talk about it largely are saying things that are offensive, or just like even if they're not overtly offensive, they're kind of first thought.
Yeah.
But it's clearly on the cultural mind right now, and so I think that you know, it just, like I said, right place, right time.
Yeah.
I think my material just sort of lent itself to being like, oh, this is like an actual perspective on this.
Totally. And a fresh one. And it's like your comedy is very lighthearted, which I feel like is nice right now for, forgive me if that's bad to say, but do you know what I mean? Like it's like digestible in a way that I feel like maybe for some of these people who are like truly just like scared of trans people, they're kind of like, oh, like, this isn't so abrasive or something. Not that it shouldn't matter anyway.
Totally.
But you know what I mean?
But
like
definitely, yeah. And I think that's something that happens for like, you know, I think a lot of trans people, you know, other trans comics and stuff, and obviously there's a bazillion great trans comics. But rightfully so. I think a lot of people are feeling angry or just, or, it's obviously also very scary to get up in front of an audience sort of regardless. But when you know you're the only trans person in the room, it's like, Jesus Christ, and I'm on stage right now. So I think people have this sort of, a lot of bits are like, making fun of people who get it wrong or mess it up, I think. And so, like, to your point, I think that audiences can shut down at that because they're, like, not ready to look at their own
Yeah, and
shame.
It's almost like, am I allowed to laugh?
Yeah.
Like, I want to laugh, but
I'm the one
am I
fucking up. Like,
supposed
what?
to?
Yeah. But so I think sometimes I just stick a little bit more to my own stories or just try to figure out, like, I think people are really interested in the way that, like, my life has changed or the way that people perceive me has changed. And there's always something really funny, I think, to an audience about, like, being in on the joke of knowing this about me before the person in the story knows.
Yeah.
So I think that that's, like, a little bit more fun for people to, like, ease into than if they feel like it's like, oh, it's about me. And that's not to shade anybody that does that kind of material, but I think that is something that's been
helpful. They're like almost on your team like, from the jump. It's like, this is a story about us knowing something no one else knows. Like, you don't have to feel like you understand trans culture to like understand the joke I'm about to tell. Which is, I mean, what a skill also to do it that way.
You.
I feel like that's easier said than done. I'm sure. I can't believe. Did you go to school for? Can you go to school for comedy?
I think you probably can now. I'm sure they're like making programs for it now. I didn't go to NYU or any like film school or anything. I went to Wake Forest in North Carolina.
Cool.
I played soccer there, so I was like a soccer kid my whole life, and so I was always an athlete and did that kind of thing. And then I played through college, and then my junior year of college, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna play professionally. Like, what am I gonna do with my life? I had not really like looked up from.
Yeah,
the
you
soccer
were like
field
so
ever.
hyper-focused.
Yeah, I think that was like, I don't know. I'm sure you have your version of this too, but for me, that was my like, oh, I'm closeted and I don't know what else to do with my time, so I'm just gonna be really good at soccer and spend my time being like, let's go.
Hyper-focus on something.
And so I didn't. But then when I was a junior in college, I started getting. There was a sketch group on campus, like a sketch comedy group.
Oh, cool.
And I saw one of their shows and I was like, this looks amazing. Like, how are they doing this? And so then I was just like, well, I'm not gonna play pro. I might as well like do other things than just spend all my time playing soccer. So I started then, and then kind of like after COVID is when I really like took it seriously.
Like got into it.
Yeah.
It's cool because you've also had, it doesn't seem like you've done kind of like a traditional route. I feel like so many people of our age or like this generation, I'm older than you, but went the TikTok route, like straight TikTok and not necessarily working on like 5-minute, 10-minute sets. But did you do TikTok like really? Or did you go straight into like traditional comedy?
I've always been a little averse to the internet. I don't know. I posted some TikToks like in COVID, like a lot of us did. And just like, but not really like, I didn't really know yet how to be a comedian, that I wanted to be a comedian. I wasn't around enough people to know like, oh, like, the content game is kind of where it's at in that like kind of early COVID time where I think that actually people who made stuff then really did benefit from it. I feel like we're sort of on the
now people are a little
it feels like it's oversaturated at this point to like really. But anyway, so I don't know, when I moved to New York, I also think coming out of COVID, I was just like, oh my God, we get to go back and do like real shows in front of real people, and like that was so exciting. And being out and meeting people was so exciting that I was like, fuck my phone, like I want to go be doing actual stand-up. And I always just like was drawn to stand-up first and foremost more than I was like really like sketch or content stuff. So I just was like, this is what I want to do. And then like after having material to put on online,
I saw your TikTok obviously. But I'm like, oh, it's kind of flipped from some of the stuff that I know other people have done. I'm trying to think of is EJ?
EJ Marcus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love EJ.
Kind of like did the opposite, right? Kind of was doing bits and stuff, or even like I guess like a Connor Wood, or like a lot of these people just doing like bits and then turning that into stage performance. I actually shouldn't even say that about EJ. I don't know how that worked
I don't know how he I'm not familiar with like his like origin of that as well, but I mean he crashed the fuck up. His like any of his front facing stuff is so funny, and but he's like I think an example of somebody who did a good job of using it
and having both
balanced, because I definitely think there's a lot of folks, just being in the stand-up scene, it's definitely like a thing where it's like, oh, this person has like a bazillion followers and they do something great that is like clearly working on the internet, and then they come to an open mic or a show and you're like, oh, you actually have never done this, is a different thing, which is
different,
totally fair. No. I can't make anything that people want to watch regularly either, so
I'm sure you could too, but they're definitely like feel like very different beasts, and also like a live audience, anything is going to be scary, different.
Yeah.
Or even better, I guess. Like some people thrive so much more with the laughter. You know,
Yeah.
it can make you funnier.
Yeah.
Than, I don't know. I'm also like trying to gas myself up because I'm going on tour in March.
Oh, sick.
But like not a comedy tour, obviously, just like live podcast.
Yeah.
And my manager keeps being like, we have to work on your stamina so that I can like stay. But I feel like the audience will make me like have energy.
You know, it'll bring it out of you because you have to. Like you're up there.
Literally.
You know what I mean? Like you and I could stop this right now, pause, go back, you know, take a break, come
100%.
back. But when there's an audience, like obviously you're just like, well, fuck, I gotta stand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
So
Some
I
of
think
the
I'm
first,
like gassing myself up for it. Anyway.
yeah. Some of the first like hour-long sets I ever did were for these college gigs. I did some like a bunch of college shows, and those are a great way for that exact thing of like gaining that stamina because sometimes you show up and it's 2 kids in an 1,000-person lecture hall.
Perfect.
And you're like, well, they asked me to do an hour, like I won't get paid unless I sit up here for an hour, so like I guess I'm just gonna talk to you 2 for an hour, like you know what I mean? So it's
an
like
hour set feels so daunting as like a comedian. Like I feel like to have like a tight 10 or something feels like okay, I could probably, I don't know. Comedy is so interesting to me too. I had a friend who was like doing stand up in LA, and I would go to her like beginner thing it was like every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And it ended up being like the same people kind of always coming, the same comics, and her too. And it was like the 4th time that I went that I realized I'm like, okay, so we're gonna tell all the same jokes.
Yeah.
Every time, like as an audience member, I'm having a hard time laughing anymore at the jokes. But it was interesting also to watch them kind of like fine tune them and make them tighter, funnier, quicker.
Yeah.
But like it stressed me out, like the thought of it. But doing an hour, do you feel like, is that daunting or do you like it?
I like it now. It was definitely scary at first because I definitely didn't, like when I first started doing those college shows, I also didn't have an hour of material. So it was like, well, that was another thing. It was like, I will learn how to stand up here for an hour and I will figure out what to say. And sometimes it's sink or swim like that. You just got to like put yourself in that position, I think. But now I like it a lot because I feel like there's like 2 things that I'm working on at once for the hour, like the actual like jokes themselves and the, you know, sort of like working those out in like local shows and like you said, like 10-minute sets and stuff. But then there's also like the sort of arc to it, story of it, you know, how is it coming together, you know, kind of like the bigger picture stuff. And you can't really work on that unless you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you can like write things out and like make adjustments like on paper and stuff, but then you can't really know if it works until you go do it. So it's like a fun second thing to be working on all the time, that there's like this other element that I'm now like excited about doing that I like don't have when I'm just doing 10 minutes. It's like, this doesn't need to have a through line. It can be 10 separate jokes.
Yeah, it could be like, it doesn't
that are a
have
minute
to like,
each.
it doesn't
matter.
A story.
Yeah. So that's been like, so that part I think is really cool. And I also love touring because I like to go, it can be stressful sometimes, like I was saying before, like getting on stage at like a random club or something and being like, everybody in here is definitely straight and they're about to be in for a real treat for what I'm about to say. And so, you know, I think I've built a bit of a shell with that, or gotten a little bit better at like just managing that in my head. But, you know, when I go on tour, I'm like, well, these people wanted to come see this. Like, I don't have to do so much explaining about myself. I can kind of cut some of those like more, I don't know, broad explainer jokes and just like get into the meat of what I'm trying to do without actually having to feel like, oh, are people not going to like this? And then also getting to go to other parts, like, you know, we're both from the South and like getting to see like other parts of the country and be like, oh, actually there's so many queer people that came out to see this. That's really sick.
It is. I feel like there's so much power for queer people in like touring. Like I think it's also why queer people are like the best fans, even of like musicians. Like they're very dedicated fans, and it's because I think that like those spaces have become safe spaces for kids who are in, or people who are in like Minnesota.
Yeah.
You know? Or I'm always naming random places and I'm like, it could be the gayest place ever. And I'm like, Ohio.
San Francisco.
Literally. I'm like, maybe that one is okay.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, that's it. Definitely probably helps to feel like people are there for you.
Yeah, and it makes it
to trying to win someone over.
Right. You don't have to do as much of that. Obviously, there's still a little bit of that because like it's also cool to be like, oh, maybe some people just like showed up and they don't know, or they came with a friend and they've never heard anything I've ever said. So that's like, it's obviously not just people who like know my material or know my work, but it is nice to know like the majority of people, at least people, even if you're having a bad time, like you bought a ticket to see me, just walk out. If you're like, you know what I mean? Like,
so true.
You know, it's not like you're like, this club put somebody up that I don't agree with, whatever. Yeah, you know.
So true. That's gotta. Do you feel like safety concerns at all when you're traveling in those areas, or
not so? I mean, I take a lot of. I try to like remind myself a lot. You know, obviously it's like always good to like be aware and stuff. And obviously if I'm talking about it on stage, there could always be somebody who's like a little bit of a nut about it. But, you know, thankfully as like a trans guy, like that's just, I'm not as much of a target or a threat, you know, to people. It just like, most people think I'm a young man. I just like don't even, they're like, who's this like teenager checking into the hotel by himself, is usually what I get. But not too bad. I mean, I appreciate that venues, I always like make sure my agents are like on it with the venues to be like, hey, let's just be sure that like, you know, anything can get shut down that needs to get shut down. And I like to be escorted to my car afterwards or whatever, that kind of stuff. But that's pretty, you know, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm like, it's so funny. I'll see some comics are like, I'm doing Montana this week. And I'm like, who the fuck is in Montana? No offense if you're in Montana. No offense.
Someone is like,
somebody is so mad at me. I'm sorry. But so I haven't been anywhere like too like remote yet. I did go to Indianapolis recently, and that was kind of like the most. I was like, I wonder who's gonna be here.
But then sometimes those will be like the most involved crowds. You know, or the people who want it the most.
Absolutely.
Are there. So.
I had the exact same like, you know, realization when I was there, because the first night, you know, I'll start off and just be like, who here is queer, who here is straight, like just trying to get a feel for the audience. And the first night was all queer people except for one straight couple. And usually my shows are like 50-50, just you know, from pure numbers and stuff. But it was like all queer people, and I was like, oh my God, like, because like, no straight person in Indiana knows me or gives a fuck, but like all these queer people are here, which is like, and I feel like when you go to those places, to your point, it's like, this is where they need it, and where they want it.
There's an appreciation for it, in such a cool way. I can't believe you're literally touring. You've been doing comedy for not that long, really. That's crazy.
It's cool. I like, I don't know, it does. I was just reflecting on it today, just like going into the new year, and I was like, you know, I sort of already, obviously there's always more to do and more exciting things on the horizon, but I was like, dang, like I already sort of like did what I set out to do, which was to be a working comedian and touring. So I feel like the rest is just like cherry on top, which is cool.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That is really cool. Is your girlfriend also a comedian?
She is. Yeah. We actually met at an open mic, which was very cute when we both first moved here, and it was one of those things where I was like, wait, she's hot and funny, and then she was like, he's hot and funny. Who's this other funny person here? That's like, you know, almost like a little competitive about it. But then we met, and I was like, yeah, she's amazing. And then I just like.
That's awesome.
Couldn't get enough of her like material and stuff. And we've been dating for like 3 years as of the other day. So.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is that fun to both be doing the same career? Like, are you able to like work through jokes and stuff with each other, or? Yeah,
you know, it's really helpful for all kinds of things. One of my favorite things about it is like, if I have a joke that I need to run by somebody before I go to a show, she's the best person to do that, because she gets it, and she's, you know, also very funny, and she can add things to it. You know, we both work in like, you know, screenwriting as well, so like somebody to talk through scripts with and proofread and show to and stuff, which is really nice. And then also just from like, you know, this industry is crazy, and so like to have somebody else who like gets that and understands,
to have an ally,
somebody who can and also somebody who's like in your corner who you can like bitch to about the sort of annoying things that are like, you know, sort of the gold handcuffs or the, you know, champagne problems of it all that are still annoying, or like, but at the end of the day, it's like, you don't want to complain to your friends who are like, hey man, like, you know, whatever, you know.
Your job is awesome.
Whatever. So it's nice to have somebody who like, you know, loves you enough to understand that, and like you kind of like, and then, you know, obviously in the reverse for her too.
I saw you had a joke about like, if you're in a gay or straight relationship or whatever, and you're like, well, we're both 5'5", so it's nothing gayer than that. I was like, that is so real. That's so real. When you came out originally as like a lesbian in college, right? I was watching you also on Ashley Gavin's podcast.
Yeah.
And I was cracking up because that was really funny. But so you were playing soccer, and then you were like coming out there.
Yeah.
And then when did you come out as trans?
So I came out as trans in 2021. It was actually like right around the same time I started doing stand-up in New York. Partly because, you know, during the pandemic, like many people, I was having some sort of like soul-searching sort of things, and I was out as a lesbian at the time, and I'd gone through a big breakup, and I was just like, I feel like something's still like off, or like I couldn't, whatever, and I was sort of just like listening. I actually started listening to Ashley's podcast during the pandemic, and I feel like part of what helped me was listening to stuff like that, like was hearing people talk about, because I don't even know if I really like, I'm sure I had heard the word trans before. I'm sure I'd heard or was relatively, I know at some point in my life I had been exposed to it, and probably just like was like, never think about that again. But it wasn't really until then that I feel like I actually like was like, as a like full adult, was like, oh shit, like this is a real thing that people do and experience and are, and like maybe that's me. And so I moved to New York, and I met some other trans people, which was also like very helpful because I didn't know anybody in Savannah where I grew up that was trans or even really queer. And so moving to New York, being in Brooklyn, meeting other queer people, meeting trans people, I was like, oh shit, like people are actually doing this and like it's okay, and there's a whole ecosystem here and community. And so it was like, and then also doing stand-up, I was like getting up, I had some older jokes that I was talking about being a lesbian, and I was just like, I don't really feel this way anymore, and it feels bad to be up here talking about myself like this.
Resonate with what?
Yeah. And honestly, like stand-up is like, it's my way of like processing a lot of the first like year plus, and like a lot of this hour I'm working on is all about like coming out as trans and like and sort of like the changes in like the medical process and the legal process of name change and stuff, and all the funny issues that come with that. And like it was so helpful to get on stage and like talk about it because it helps me put words to what I was feeling in a way that was like light and also succinct, and but also could have this sort of edge to how I actually feel underneath it, So yeah, it was like summer 2021. I was like grappling with it, and then I started like, coming out to my family, changing my name, and medically transitioning and stuff. And
that's also like extremely vulnerable to do, and like in a comedy set.
Yeah.
To like be figuring that out and then also sharing it at the same time. I'm sure, like, I feel like I've had and seen that experience with people just like through social media, navigating their queerness and then making content around it, and then being like, whoa, like changing very fast. Some of those changes happen so fast, like emotionally, that like, did you feel like your material was like aging faster as you were just like changing so quickly?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because I feel like that's something people don't recognize often, but that is real, like, because especially like, 99% of comics have a joke where they're like, oh, I bet you think I'm Steve Buscemi with a haircut or whatever, like something stupid. And, so of course we all have our version of that. And I was sort of realizing in real time, like, and part of the reason I think people do that is you need the audience to know that you understand the joke about you off the bat, or like you need the audience to understand that you are confident and that you know who you are and what you look like to them.
Yeah.
And like that they can just piece you together in 1 second, so that we don't have to worry about that anymore. Like kind of calling, taking the air out of whatever that joke about you that they're going to make and make a funnier one, right? That's like a good way to like sort of burst through at the beginning. And I was just realizing, I was like, oh fuck, like I have to update this joke every 2 months because I'm changing so much. Quickly. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like it's not one of those things where I'm like, I can do this for the next 10 years, because that's just not true. Like I just So that was just like and also just changing the way that I felt. Like there were certain things where I was like, I don't really like the way the audience is laughing at that, because I feel like they're laughing at me and not the joke, or not like what I'm trying to say, and then and just trying to like adjust to that kind of thing too.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, but it's definitely something I like have had to think about. And there's just like certain jokes as I like pass more that people don't like as much, because they're like, even though they know I'm a trans guy, they're just still like, wait a second, like there's a guy saying that, like sometimes that gets a little tricky.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's like it's evolving as you're evolving, which I guess all comedians are dealing with, but it's just crazy because you're evolving much faster.
Right.
I would like assume.
Yeah.
As opposed to like aging in 10 years. Like.
Right.
I saw such an interesting thing. This is so random, but I saw this interesting TikTok earlier today of this trans guy being like, no one talks about aging as a trans person, because I only started to feel like myself when I was 24, and I already have gray hairs in my beard. And I was like, that must be such just the passage of time changes so much when you're going through, especially like a medical transition, I feel. Yeah. What a scary administration we have coming. How do you feel about that? Are you like, and you're in like queer spaces a lot too, right? So I'm sure you're having lots of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously really scary. That was not the outcome I hoped for at all. And, I mostly, I feel very lucky being in New York and, having access to the healthcare I do. And I already like had top surgery and like the main, the major things I needed to get done. Like I'm glad for it, like my name changed and stuff. I'm mostly worried about, obviously, like, both of us being from the South, like we were talking about earlier, like, I'm more nervous for like kids across the country and trans women across the country than I am for myself. But it's still like, it's frustrating more so to see how many people like, again, being from the South, there was just plenty of people in my life who, voted for Trump or just like don't understand how those things connect. Yeah. And they don't see that like, you can't in the same breath say that you support me, care about people like me, and then also like vote for this administration. Those things just don't go together, especially when it's like some crazy number, like 60 or 70% of their advertising revenue was spent on anti-trans ads.
It was crazy.
Which is like, I want people to understand that trans people are so not their problem. It's like, it's so not their, like, it's so not affecting their life. I just wish people would care more about themselves enough to like be like, stop shoving this at us because it's really not our problem. Like, let's fix something.
Did you see he had one of his ads was like, Kamala's for they and them.
Yes.
I'm for you.
Yes.
Like,
and it's just like, what dumbass, like, who is buying this shit and is like, yeah, that's right. And it just, I mean, I think it probably just goes, you know, I don't know how much it's upsetting to me that 60 to 70% of the ads were that, because that just like shows you what they're focused on and like what they think they can get people to focus on. But I was like, those ads are so dumb. I'm like, this can't be winning anybody over. Like, they've already made up their mind. There's no way.
I know.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, is that what worked for you guys?
Yeah.
I also, in LA, I very rarely am watching like TV.
Yeah.
And then I forget where, I think I was watching a sports game or something. And that's when I started seeing it. And I was like, is this what everyone is seeing everywhere? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my God. And it'd probably be like so much worse like I was in Texas at one point during the election. And I was like, holy shit.
Dude, I was in Austin the weekend that Trump was there to do Joe Rogan's podcast. And it was like crazy traffic, and they were like, "Oh, Trump's here, Trump is here." I was like, "Why the fuck is he in Austin right now?" I was like, "We cannot be in a world where a podcast is making political decisions." I just like,
except we are.
Yeah, and no, I mean, same thing. I was touring so much around like October, November and like I was in hotels, and so in like
you're like seeing
Indiana
TV,
and other places. So I was seeing real TV, and I was like, Jesus Christ, is this what is on?
Yeah, it's scarier than I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm already hyper aware that I'm in a bubble, and I'm like in a bubble in LA, and then I'm in a bubble within my own friend group of like so many gay people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I know that I'm participating in an echo chamber, even when I go on my phone, because it's so curated to me.
Yeah.
But it was like so much worse than I could have even thought that what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, like outside, it's like, oh my God, I looked up and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
This is the reality that some of you are living in. I probably would be scared of trans people too. If every time I turned on my TV, they're like, Kamala's for they.
And they're going to come get you. Like, I don't even know what.
What are they going to do?
Yeah, yeah. Read you stories? I don't know.
It is so interesting. Right before you came here, I had a trans woman on. And so we were talking about that lived experience is so different. And it's so funny with the sports thing, how much focus we're putting on trans women in sports.
Yeah.
And that like really, I feel like no one's even really talking about trans men.
No.
It's like,
no.
It's like a non-event. They're like, well, obviously they won't be able to play with us.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just like feels so anti-woman. Like,
for sure. I mean, it's of course rooted in misogyny and racism and all the other things that transphobia is rooted in. And what I'm like, do we care so much about trans women in sports because Caitlyn Jenner's the most famous trans woman? Like, is it really just because they're like, well, she was an Olympian, so they must all be fast?
No,
like,
literally, they're like, that's the only trans woman I've ever seen.
I sometimes I'm like, is that what people like? Is that why people are so hellbent on it? I mean, there's obviously so many arguments about, you know, nobody, you know, what man cared about women's sports before this issue, you know, first of all, other than sports betting on the WNBA, like, what did you give a fuck about? You know, there's like 12 or something, like there's like a dozen trans athletes in the country or something, like in high school sports, like something, or like the NCAA. It's like so low.
It's just such a minute problem.
No, it's like, and again, I just want to shake America and say, we are not your problem, I promise. And we don't want to be. We don't want to be.
No, literally, like we just want to live and let live.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It reminds me so much of, it really does remind me so much of like queerness and just like gayness and how for so long not everyone knew a gay person, and then as soon as like everyone kind of knew a gay person, I feel like everyone was like, okay, yeah, you guys can be gay. Yeah. But like with the trans community, I feel like still so few people actually know a real trans person or like an out trans person, you know? So there's so much more, all the unknowns of it for these people, just they are able to let their minds run wild.
Yeah. I think we're hitting it at the exact moment of like, you know, relatively speaking, it's probably like our newest social issue in terms of like people being aware of it.
Yeah.
It's come about in the age of the internet where 90% of conversations are being had online between you know, people in the comments who, you know, maybe don't even really feel how they feel. They're just letting it out. You know, we're in one of the worst news media landscapes we've ever been in. There's like this crazy, you know, presidential, you know, landscape as well. Like, so there are all these factors that I think are leading to it being as like volatile of a conversation as it is. You know, and it's funny with like gay people, it's like, it feels like Will and Grace, and then maybe a decade or 2 decades later, Glee, and then 5 years later, Modern Family. I feel like those things like really pushed people in the right direction because it was just like, as limited and maybe poor representation as it was in certain aspects, it was like it was nonetheless, you know, cable TV.
Totally.
Everybody can watch this.
Totally.
You know, this is here, and I just feel like until we have, I mean, and obviously that's not the only way, and that's obviously representation is such a thin slice on the top of the iceberg, but it's, I think what helped really get queer people across the line in the first place.
100%. It helps so much. And I always say, like, there's like an element of like, I keep saying this on my podcast. I'm like, does anyone even, no one's ever commented and been like, that was insightful, Shannon. I keep saying it anyway.
Somebody do it today.
Come on. No, there is like there's a power, like a superpower to going into living rooms. Like, and that is such it's sad though too, because I feel like we're already losing that as a superpower in that not everyone is like consuming television the same way.
There's not really monoculture in that way.
Exactly. Like it's like one kid is on their iPad and another kid is watching the TV and another kid is on their MacBook. You know, and like your parents are watching something on their phone. So not everyone is having this like living room experience anymore. But that's kind of what I grew up with. And like with Grey's Anatomy, seeing lesbians on Grey's Anatomy, I was like, I'm watching this with the girl I have a crush on, and the girl I have a crush on's mom is in the room, and fast forwarding through it. But like, still, it is like
not
this representation. Oh yeah, and also like we couldn't listen to Katy Perry, "I Kissed a Girl," like nothing. She's like, oh, and then we're like holding hands under the blanket. It's like it was the whole thing. But it's going to be interesting to push these kinds of like types of representation when not everyone is watching the same television.
Yeah.
I think that's where like reality TV comes in a really cool way because it does feel like it's still more like culturally universal. Like everyone will get behind a show, even just watching like the Queer Ultimatum or Ultimatum or whatever. All these things, like when it's popular, it's like so on your timeline. So I feel like it's inspiring a lot of people to watch this stuff. Like I haven't seen that kind of drive to a TV show or a movie in the same way I feel that social media is drawing in audiences to like reality TV.
Yeah. I think it's like, you know, it's hard with movies these days. I mean, with anything, because, you know, even if it's the biggest hit in the world, it's on the cultural timeline for 3 seconds. And, you know, faster and faster with the internet and news and everything. And so it feels like, you know, big reality shows that have like, what's it called? Love Island has like 40 episodes or something insane per season. Like I might be wrong.
It's like 56.
It's crazy.
It's like
so
forever.
they have 56 days or weeks or whatever it is to like catch up on this and be a part of it and let it build and build. And I think any show now like that has like, you know, they're coming out weekly or they're whatever, it just like gives it that time to build online. In a way that like a lot of stuff just like doesn't get anymore.
So true. And I feel like we miss it. Like it seems like
I
miss it because
people miss it a lot.
As much as it's like so fun, obviously, to binge a show, there was something so exciting about watching a show, like even like Lost back in the day, where it was like you had all week to talk about what you thought was going to happen the next week, or like Survivor back then was so big in that way, right? But I feel like I wish it would come back. I hope it will come back.
Me too. I mean, it seems like all these streamers are learning quickly that it's not a profitable thing, and they're all sort of combining and collapsing into each other again. So I think we'll probably end up back with like 3 different services that are like basically pay cable. I hope. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I agree, because it's just like it's too much and it's directionless, and so much on the fringes is just like nonsense crap. And it's like if we just like spent all of our efforts on like good things, because I find the things that I'm most excited about, like I loved Succession and I love like White Lotus and like any of those, like that feels like when it's like must see TV. It's like everybody's watching this every week, and like
it's like the HBOs and the Showtimes.
Those are the only ones.
They still have it figured out. And we're still like obsessed with it.
Also with like binge watching things, it's like, why did Netflix like anything else that starts with binge, like binge drinking, binge eating. Like, none of that is good for you. And then, but like, we're like, oh yeah, we can just like binge watch. That's fine. And like, that won't come back to bite us in the ass at all.
Yeah, that is so true. It was in the name.
Yeah,
it was
like,
in the
this is
name.
not
We were
good.
being warned and we did it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think like representation, obviously, because if you think about it, even what you're saying to like figuring out your transness from watching a podcast, like representation, it's so much more important than I think people even realize. I had like a TikTok go viral where I was telling people that Cynthia from Wicked is gay, and it went viral like in a way I didn't mean for. I just was like, me ever since I found out Cynthia's gay, like telling everyone I know.
Yeah.
And like the comment section obviously got into the other side of TikTok because the comment section became like, and who cares? And why does it matter? And why is that important? Can't people be more than their sexuality? And then like millions of comments, like so many comments, and then people being like, and she's also an amazing actor. I'm like, yeah, okay, and she's also gay. So and then also, God, I said she's gay. I just wrote because I would have written,
which is just a catch-all word.
Yeah, I would have written. I feel like queer. I wanted it to get to other audiences, and I feel like queer is like feels more like political and feels more like the queer community gets to use it in a way that sometimes I feel like straight people are still scared of the word.
Yeah.
I had my great aunt at a wedding. I just went to be like, I have a bone to pick with you. This woman's like 80 years old. She's like, I love your podcast. I love your content. Stop using that word queer. I was like, oh. No, so we reclaimed it.
It's okay
reclaimed
now.
it. And she's like, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I was like, okay, well, I don't really think I'm going to do what you're saying to do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I'm glad she's a listener.
Yeah, me too.
Shout out if you're listening.
Hi, Aunt Bonnie.
That's funny. Yeah.
No, but yeah, people don't understand how people who feel represented all the time don't understand how nice it feels to be represented or like see yourself in any capacity. And also even lately, like thinking about future planning and like what a life looks like as a lesbian, I'm like, who are my role models exactly? Like, I'm not saying there are none. Obviously there are many, but I don't necessarily have someone I look up to that I'm like, that character with that wife and that baby, I saw myself there, you know? Still now I don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome to see so much change, but also I'm like, oh my God, we need so many other things, because I feel like it would just make everyone less scared, one, and also give other people more hope.
Definitely.
That they have something to look forward to.
Yeah. I mean, I like, you know, on that TikTok thing, like, it's so funny. Like, I don't know how you feel. Sometimes I'll post something on TikTok and then like it'll, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, if it's doing well enough, the wrong people are going to see it.
100%.
And that always sucks to play that little sort of catch-22. But then also sometimes I'm like, especially for me, because it's like this already existed in a real place, and then I filmed it, and then I put it on thing, and so it's kind of like, you know, whatever. But I'm like, did I just create a space for nonsense discourse? Like, is that all I did today was just create a thread of the worst conversation on both sides? People just like nitpicking words and like to that, it's like, okay, queer or gay or what are we gonna say, like whatever, like it's just so. And then it's also like that I'm sure was like a 20-second max video, like whatever, you know, it's a joke, it's like one thing, it's like a quick video, and then people wanting you to say so much more, wanting you to basically give a dissertation on
literally
everything about
on her queerness. I'm like,
and how that intersects with her work, and it's like, that is like, go read a JSTOR article, like leave me alone.
Literally. I'm like, do you know this is TikTok?
Yeah,
like, this is not that deep.
No, this is supposed to be a memeable thing to repost. Literally. Like, relax. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, people were like, she identifies as bi, and then I replied to like one person just being like, gay is an umbrella word. I just used it as an umbrella word, and then didn't even matter, like thousands more comments being like, bi, queer. I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I give a fuck because words have meaning, but like, you know how I meant it.
Yeah.
You know, people just want to, I don't know. It sucks right now with the environment that we're in, where it's like, feels like kind of as queer people, we also are turning on each other, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, or really holding people to really high standards, which is beautiful and amazing because we should all grow and learn and become better.
Yeah.
But also, like, we're all just people. So it's just so stressful.
It's definitely frustrating. I feel that as like you know, I've talked to some other, you know, queer artists and stuff. And anybody who's like a queer artist online, I think really feels this exact thing you're talking about, where it's like a self-cannibalizing thing, like of other queer people, being the ones to call you out about this or that. And I totally agree. I think it's important that we like hold ourselves to a high standard and strive to be better and to move the community towards progress. But it often doesn't feel like that's where it's really coming from. It's coming from like a I gotcha, like kind of thing on the internet, and like, oh, here's something I can call you out on. And it's like, I think you're actually mad at somebody far scarier and more powerful than I am, but you don't have the ability, the guts, the whatever to like call out.
You don't have the access to them.
Those people, or if it's somebody in your life, like you don't have the guts to do it to them, so you're gonna just come on here and get mad at me for something that like probably isn't, in the grand scheme of things, I'm doing my best, and you are probably too, you know what I mean? So it's just, but it is frustrating because it's like we could just turn all this energy, enough with the labels and the bullshit and whatever it is, that our stupid little infights, like nobody cares, like they're gonna take our rights away regardless of what we call ourselves.
Literally like gay, bi, queer, do we have rights? Like can we get married? I don't know. It just does feel so self-cannibalizing. It's crazy. But also, like, so much of it is just like projection of your own, people's own stuff, and queerness is so loaded with so many layers. So it's like I try to have empathy as well when I'm seeing discourse that just feels nonsensical, and like also just like what needle are we pushing and where to?
Like, and I also try to remind myself too, like 90% of these people are children like, on the internet. Like these are 16-year-olds who are having this conversation for the first time, and like I'm like, just like as you were saying before, like I'm in an echo chamber of other like queer adults who have had time and access being in New York, LA, and like around those things, to have the access to like reading about things, or at least like hearing about more evolved sort of takes on these things, or just feeling a little, just in general feeling more at ease with yourself because you're a 30-year-old queer person and not a 16-year-old queer person who's like, like I'm gonna type. So I try to also be like, all right, this is probably a kid, like I don't need to get in a fight with this.
So true.
But also just like, I just get frustrated especially when it comes to like little minutia bullshit like that, because it's like, it's so antithetical to what queerness is, and what I'm finding as I'm becoming more myself is that it all is the same, and there's more likeness than difference in the queer community. And I think that like there's importance of labeling and naming things so that we can identify ourselves and understand ourselves, but like after you understand yourself, you can kind of let go. You can
let that go. Yeah, I definitely feel
there's a tribalism that's not healthy.
100%. I feel like when I was like first coming out, those like micro labels, or like labels within the labels of like, oh, I'm not just a lesbian, I'm a chapstick lesbian. Which I will still say, especially because I know that my audience is not, even if they're not young, a lot of them are not fully like accepting of their queerness yet. So I'm like, I'm going to give you these words so that you have them, so that if you hear it and it helps you, good. But like for me, do I care if I'm a chapstick lesbian, or like someone called me mask lesbian and everyone's like, Shannon is not a mask lesbian. She is a tomboy with a ponytail. I'm like, okay. I didn't even say it about myself. It's not even a label I'm like trying to claim. Anyway, I'm just like, I don't care. Once you get older and you're comfortable, it's like, okay, I mean, and I still also I'm trying my best to champion the word lesbian. I feel like it was so dirty for so long in a way, based off whatever culture. But, and when I first came out, I would always just say I'm gay.
Same.
And then at some point when I like really am like, oh my God, my platform is very much about my queerness, I'm like, okay, I'm a lesbian. And then you hear it enough times and I'm like, yeah, it's fucking awesome.
The sting away. No, I felt the same way. I mean, obviously there maybe is more going on because I ultimately, well, the word lesbian's encompassing and yada, yada, yada. And I think it expands to trans guys too, especially if that's a word that a trans guy likes. And I do like the word lesbian. But it was something that I also struggled to. I was always just say I'm gay, because I like, it did feel like such a dirtier word, and obviously there's like tons of history of misogyny there, but to bring it back to that joke you mentioned about my girlfriend earlier, about how people ask if we're gay or we're straight, because I'm a trans guy and she's a cis woman, and people are like, what is happening here? And it's like, exactly, like it doesn't matter, like are you in the relationship, then go away, like it does not matter. Literally. And like for me, at this point it's like, okay, figuring out that I'm trans was the biggest hurdle for me, or the biggest realization that I've made in my life. Like anything beyond that, I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, call me gay, call me straight, I don't care. Like, I mean, I prefer you don't call me straight, but that's not my culture. I don't feel I align with them. But it's just like all the sexuality stuff on top of that. I'm like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
it is what it is. I just say queer because I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's ironic because it feels like a huge like policing of queerness and like policing of labels, and like it is just so the opposite of queer culture is to police anything.
Exactly.
Like, the whole point is to like let people live.
Right, and let it free flow. And it's like, this should be like a river of things, not like, these little segmented.
Yeah. And also, like, I recently was talking about it, but it does feel like for some people in the community, like, people's queerness is conditional. Like, they're happily like taking it away from people. It's like, oh, okay, you're a bi woman and now you have a boyfriend, you're straight.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, who are you to decide that? But also, it's just, I fear that it also makes our community seem intimidating and like not something someone would ever want to explore, even if they deeply wanted to.
100%.
Like, it could be the reason that they're like, oh, well, that happened to that girl and I saw it play out online.
Yeah.
Even though that's happening online, and then in reality, in most of the conversations I have, like with my queer friends, people would not be like, Stephanie is straight now. Did you hear? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll be like, I mean, some people would be like, damn it, she got a boyfriend. But not like, she's not bi anymore.
Yeah.
But if your only access to these conversations is the internet and specifically TikTok, holy shit.
Well, you're just hearing it from a 17-year-old who like doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Or like,
or
are oddly very
doesn't.
smart. Like, sometimes I watch some stuff and I'm like, oh my God, whatever book you read, I need to read it. But also, I do feel that this is hurting more than helping.
Yeah.
Like, the regurgitation of just like really cool facts about queerness. I'm like, awesome that you know all that. But we could do that and also be inclusive rather than use it as like a tactic to exclude people from this community.
Yeah. Well, it's so tough with like, I think a lot of exclusion comes from, again, like I think we both feel like a desire to give people the benefit of the doubt and like, and also like have some empathy and hold some space for like what is all going into this. Cause I think, I mean, anytime somebody's like, fuck bi women, I'm like, who hurt you? Which bi woman hurt you? You know what I mean? And like, me too. I've been there. Like, and I've been frustrated by it. And like, but it, I don't think people just need to do a better job, I think, of like recognizing, oh, this is a me thing. It's not a bi women thing. This is like, I had a bad experience.
100%.
And that was like one person and not everybody.
Yeah, that was Rachel, not every bisexual.
Yeah,
ever.
exactly. And I think there's that. And then I also think like, I think we're inclined to self-protect, and even if you are, pretty well with yourself, I think there's always like a little bit of an internalized homophobia, transphobia, all the others. And like, I think when we see something that triggers whatever in us is trying to protect ourselves, it's like, get away, don't be that. You know? So I think that's two things I see that people definitely,
100%.
where it comes from.
You know what? I wonder if you think this is true. I feel like a lot of queer people that I know have origin stories of their relationships where it's like one person or even both people were like, I'm going to be single for a while, and then somehow they end up dating each other.
Yeah.
Like, I hear that story so often. Very rarely do I hear queer people that I know that are like, I was 100% ready for a relationship. And so was
and
she.
Super self-actualized, and we figured it out. Yeah.
I feel like I was thinking about this the other day too, because I'm like, is it sort of like a scarcity mindset because for so long queer people have been such a minority that we're like, oh my God, well, you're an awesome lesbian. So if it's not you, then I'm risking losing, like, even if the partnership isn't perfect on paper, you're like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
100%.
It's kind of like, I have to keep you.
100%. I think I've definitely experienced that in my dating life too, because like, especially coming out of the South and like, there were not a lot of gay people where I went to college or just like whatever. And so I just like, anytime somebody was, I was like, you're gay? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, like this is like,
you're
I
for
can't
me.
believe this. Like we have to be together, I guess, because there's nobody else here. But yeah, I think that like definitely that. I also think it's probably, I'm sure a lot of people have this experience too, where like the line between friend and more than friend is so blurry with queer people, of course. And like that is something like upon first meeting, I think there's always a little bit of like, are we? Oh, we're just friends. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if it ends up being like, oh, we're actually definitely just buddies. Like, there's always like a little, any queer person is like, what? Okay. And then, so I think that.
Am I reading into that?
Yeah. So I think there's always that element where like, it's really easy to fall into things because you're like, this could go from friends to not friends so quickly.
That is so true. That is so true. I feel like there's not many chronically single queer people. Like, you know.
Yeah, gay men.
Well, yeah.
They're like a different breed, though.
I'm so sorry. I have to say, I think I forget about gay men. Like, often in this podcast.
Yeah, that's good.
Like,
they have their own space.
I don't know how many of them are watching. Anyway,
they got their own things. No, the only really single, like, I mean, obviously there's plenty of single queer people out there. Whatever. No, if you're listening, we're praying for you. But the most of the like chronically single gay people I know are gay men that are just like. Because their ecosystem is totally different. Like, it's so more, you know, this is such a generalization, but it's so much more like sex first, sex forward, you know, with Grindr and things like that, especially at least in the city and stuff. And then it feels like lesbian, you know, queer dyke spaces are a lot more like friends and, you know, or like connection, long-term relationships, you know, U-hauling and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Also, when I say like chronically single, I feel like I also mean like people choosing to be single at the same time. You know what I mean? Because I'm just now having this flashback to the conversation I had before with the trans girl that she was like, it seems like she wants to have a boyfriend or like would be open to love. And because she likes cis straight men, there is like a singleness that happens in those spaces too that is like maybe not chosen. Yeah. So I guess like rather than chronically single, I mean like choosing singleness. Like. Yeah. Okay, do you have anything exciting coming up that people should check out? Look out for?
You can find me on Instagram at Nico Carney. Most of my tour dates and things are linked there. I'm going on tour in 2025 to hopefully a lot of cities. So please, if you're digging this, check me out.
Yay. Yeah. Okay, this was so awesome. Yeah, it was so nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
That was too easy. Okay, yeah. All of Nico's links will be in the description below. You can follow him everywhere.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yay.